25 years after a devastating global pandemic, nature reclaims the earth. Buildings lie empty. The wreckage of the world before surrounds you. Inside every derelict shop, every creaky basement, danger lurks. Either from other survivors, or from humans afflicted with a fungal infection that reduces them to flesh-eating monsters. The world of The Last of Us Part 2 is not a happy place. In creating a sequel to one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time, its developers, Naughty Dog, have crafted a grim and sometimes unsettling game. One which often challenges the player to think about violence and its corrosive effect.
I think The Last of Us, the original game, is so well regarded because it did something new. It was really defining what a PS3 game at the time looked like in terms of visual definition, in terms of fidelity, in terms of realism. But then on top of that, it laid on this human story of parenthood, of discovering what it is to love again and to be protective.
Things that you do in that game, they aren't straightforwardly good. The moral implications of what you as the player do leave you thinking at the end. The other thing that made The Last of Us very memorable was the characters were just really human. You had Joel, who was the gruff, kind of, harmed father figure with damage. And then you had Ellie, who was despite everything, despite the post-apocalyptic setting, she was quite optimistic and quite reverent teenager.
The player controls Joel in the vast majority of the first game. This time around, Ellie takes centre stage. Where the last game was essentially an epic road trip which becomes an examination of paternal love and the lengths one will go to preserve it, the sequel is concerned with revenge and the unhealthy effect it has on everything it touches. The game's narrative lead, Halley Gross's background is in film and TV, notably writing for HBO's Westworld.
I remember when I sat down with Neil Druckmann 4 years ago and he pitched me what the story would be, it was trying to make a conversation about empathy, make a conversation about tribalism, and how we can really change our perspective when we're walking in somebody else's shoes.
This time round, Ellie's quest takes her to a ruined Seattle, a city divided by human factions, as well as the infected. Scavenging for supplies and equipment as well as crafting improvised weapons is crucial to survival. The player is always outnumbered or outgunned, so listening out for enemies, a cunning use of distraction, and a stealthy approach to combat are key. This game really is very violent indeed, so it's no surprise it carries a
Peggy 18.
But all that violence and gore does serve a purpose. It helps reinforce some of the game's themes, pushing the player to think about their actions while they're playing the game.
It's the kind of thing you would see in a fairly extreme horror movie or an extreme thriller. And the thing that makes The Last of Us quite interesting is that it interrogates that violence a lot. It interrogates the motivation behind that violence a lot. And that makes it quite uncomfortable to play. It makes it a challenging experience to play because you're not always having fun.
We also want to make you understand that every choice in this world, sort of like every choice in life, has a cost. So if we made that violence feel quote unquote fun, you're losing the cumulative impact on all of our characters as they exist in this world.
I think they should be terrified of me.
With an ethnically diverse cast, a trans character, and a gay relationship between Ellie and new character Dina, this title also reflects a more diverse world than video games usually present.
I think we really wanted to exemplify the diversity we see around us. We're a diverse studio, we really appreciate different voices, and we wanted to make people feel seen and heard. So we absolutely did want to represent the culture we see around us right now. We see LGBTQ culture in our everyday life. That was important to us,
The story is, of course, a big part of the experience, but it's a testament to the quality of the game's overall design, and how well it manages to manipulate the emotions of the player. It does so in a way that few other forms of entertainment would be able to. As the game progresses, you empathise with its characters because it often feels like you really have walked several hundred hard miles in their shoes, feeling every hardship, understanding every decision and their consequences.
Me too.
The Last of Us Part 2 isn't perfect. Quite a lot of the action can feel as if it's on rails, as if the player is being propelled along on a theme park ride. Some of the story can feel a little bit like a soap opera at times as well, but these are small issues in an otherwise very good game.
Don't.
The game had already had its launch delayed by the real-world COVID-19 pandemic when a spoiler-filled leak emerged online.
Which included gameplay footage, key plot points, and potentially the game's ending.
There had been some speculation that it was some disgruntled developer, Naughty Dog themselves, or even that it was some kind of publicity stunt, but that wasn't the case at all.
It was really disappointing. We've spent 4 years trying to craft this experience for the player that allows for surprise, and so having those cinematics out of context, I don't think takes away from the experience at all. And in fact, a lot of people have said it's as much as they think they know what's happening in the game, they really don't.
Sony is now saying that none of the developers at Naughty Dog or any of its own staff were responsible for the leak.
There have often been stories about the sheer amount of work that the developers have been put through and the overwork that developers have had to suffer in order to deliver these kind of enormous, very expensive games. And it is still, unfortunately, very much a fact of modern game development. So developers like Naughty Dog have taken a lot of flack for their working practices, and that has been a motivation for some of the pushback and some of the outcry against games like The Last of Us 2. But I think also sometimes that is used as a smokescreen for people who otherwise have some other problem with the game, with its representation, with whatever else they have an issue with.
The first time around, The Last of Us changed what a lot of people thought was possible as far as storytelling in games is concerned. The Last of Us Part 2 continues to push that envelope, but don't expect the experience to be a cheery one.
I don't care. Get dressed.
You're the worst.